Okay, so girls and boys, we didn't quite finish chapter 1 yesterday, so we will be finishing up chapter 21 right now and then moving to chapter 22. But just for a recap, real quickly, Peter found a newspaper article in Vola's kitchen, and it said that the war is moving towards where he left Pax. So he's really anxious now, and he told Vola he's leaving, and so she has thought up a plan. Stay tuned to listening. Hold on, Vola lifted the paper. You come on over here. You see something. Peter frowned. He wanted to get going, but he swung back over. Robert Johnson, bus driver friend I've been telling you about, who's been mailing your letters. You see the spot here? And she tapped the top left corner of the map in the article. That town is the final stop on his route. He passes through here at 10 past 11 on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and this is where he pulls up at the end of the night. What if I put you on that bus tomorrow? Seems like that would save you at least 250 miles, leave you about 40 miles to cover on your own. Are you listening now? Peter dropped his crutches and sank to the chair, jelly-legged with relief. You'd do that for me? Only 40 miles? That's nothing. Oh, no. 40 miles across woods and hills on crutches is not nothing. 3 days at least, I'd figure, and it'll just about kill you. But I think you can do it, so you'll stay the night now. Deal? Peter took her hand and met her gaze. Deal, he shook. Looking at Vola, her face tear-streaked from what had happened in the barn, but he knew he couldn't leave things as broken as they were now, and he didn't have much time to fix them. Deal, he said again, on 3 conditions. Oh boy, there's those conditions again. So we're going to move on to chapter 22 continued. Now we're going to move on to chapter 23. I have to write this so I can remember it when I go to upload it. So now we're on to chapter 23. Okay, back to Pax. The moon shone through the trees as full and creamy yellow as the eggs Pax had eaten a week before. His stomach crammed as he paced the river's edge. Only 3 times in the week and a half since his humans had left him had he eaten a big meal enough to fill his belly. In the last one, a pile of fish rotting on the bank, he had retched up minutes later. Retched means kind of like he vomited it up. He had retrieved the cached ham and watched with pride as Bristle and Runt ate the meat, but he hadn't touched any of it, and he still had had no luck in hunting. All his fat reserves were gone. His coat hung loose, and he was burning muscle now. Pax trained his nose to the humans' camp, which, as always, tortured him with its rich food scents. Over the past 2 days, more war sick had arrived, and hundreds of them were massing to the south beyond. The ground vibrated with their threat. But Pax was hungry. He looked over to where Bristle was guarding the sleeping Runt and signaled that he would leave. Although he could see the camp directly above him, he chose his old route, up the gorge and across the ridge, because the guards on the wall were facing the river. He padded up the rocks and the water, leaving no tracks. Away from the silence of the devastated field, his ears pricked toward the night sounds. He knew them now. They comforted him. The thin piping of bats, the careless crashing of a waddling skunk, the underground bustle of voles, the distant calls of owls, all these sounds told him he was not hunting alone. Pax himself made no noise. He had learned the secrets of stealth from Gray and Bristle. Like a shadow, he slipped across the ridge, down the hill, and into the food tent. No easy meat hung this night, but the tables were piled high with vegetables and breads. He knocked a wheel of cheese to the ground. The taste was strong and strange, but he gulped until his belly stretched tight. As he headed back out, carrying a hunk for Bristle, a familiar scent stopped him in his tracks. Peanut butter. It was drifting out a large metal can. Pax dropped the cheese. He stood to sniff at the rim. Like the garbage bin at his boy's home, the can promised a variety of scraps. But above the commingled scents rose the one he craved more than any other. His whiskers ruffled in pleasure. He nudged the lid aside a few inches. The clear jar lay on top of the heap, its sides still smeared thick with the creamy peanut butter. Pax edged his snout under the lid and bit the top of the rim carefully. He knew from experience that this was how to grip the jar so it didn't cover his nose. He pushed away from the garbage can, and the lid clattered to the stony ground, ringing an alarm in the quiet night. Pax ducked under the table and froze, his pulse quickening. Across the tent, the flap snapped open. A human stepped in and clicked on a beam of light. Even over the peanut butter, Pax recognized the scent. His boy's father. Pax raised a paw, ready to dart in whatever direction seemed safest. The man swept the light around the tent. When it fell on Pax's eyes, he winced, but he didn't move. His pupils adjusted, and Pax saw the man crouched to stare at him. Pax remained frozen, paw still raised, jar still clamped in his jaws, studying the man's face as the man studied his face. The man grunted, rubbing his chin. Then he gave a rough laugh. Pax lowered his paw an inch, holding the man's gaze, testing him. His boy's father laughed again, and then rose and lifted the tent flap. He kicked his boot through the opening. Pax knew the signal. The man had used it on him often at the door of the human's house, at the door of his pen. Go through, it meant. Go through right now, and I won't harm you. The pact was reliable. Pax sped past him into the safety of the night. He didn't slow down until he reached the spine of the hill. He buried the jar and then crouched to watch for movement at the camp in the pre-dawn light. Although he was certain no humans had followed him, he took off east, snaking a loose loop for half an hour before doubling back to drop down to the river. Runt was now awake when Pax returned, and for the first time since the explosion, he was struggling to rise. Bristle urged him back down, but Pax saw that his lips were cracked and his eyes sunken. He needs water. Bristle took to the river's edge. A dozen full bounds for a healthy fox. Would it even be possible for Runt? The little fox braced his forelegs. He tightened his haunches to rise, and then looked back in surprise. The leg that had been part of him his whole life, as much a part of him as his own scent, was now gone. He bent and sniffed at the wound. He looked up at Pax and then Bristle as if searching for an explanation why his leg was gone. Again he straightened upward. His one remaining back leg jacked him up, and Runt rolled onto his wounded haunch with a yelp of pain. Pax leaped to stand by his injured side. Runt got to his front legs once more and then straightened his one back leg. Again he cantered over. This time, though, he fell against the strong, tall flank of the older fox, and he did not cry out. He wobbled, searching for a new balance. When he found it, Pax took a single step toward the water and then waited. Runt stepped out, first the two front legs, and then a dragging hop with the single back leg, and a collapse against Pax. Again, Pax took a single step. Again, the small fox matched it, and again, and once more, until he didn't waver at all. Bristle ran ahead to the bank, and step by wounded step, Runt closed the distance until he flopped down by the river bank and stretched his neck out to lap at the cool water. When he was satisfied, he dropped his head, his eyes closing. But Bristle nipped him. Soon it would be full daylight. He would be exposed. She ran upriver to a stand of cattails. Runt limped after her. He was still clumsy and trembling and slow, but he did not fall once. Pax followed close by. Just as they reached the stand of reeds, Pax startled at the crackling of brush from downstream. Bristle's head snapped around too, ears cocked to the same spot across the river. Something large was coming. Runt dipped his head to sniff at a snail. Pax and Bristle backed into the cattail reeds. Bristle called to her brother. Runt did not turn his head. A buck pranced out of the vegetation, tossed his antlers, and then splashed into the river. Bristle barked for her brother again and again, and he ignored her. The deer clattered up onto the other bank, heading for the bright grass of an unscorched area of field. At its edge, he lifted a hoof. As he set it down, the earth rocked and the bright grass blew. The buck burst up, his back twisting and snapping. Runt screamed with terror at the quaking ground. Bristle and Pax herded him into the cool dark of the cattail reeds and soothed him until he understood that he was not harmed. The foxes watched the soldiers run down the hill, sweep their beams of light over the heap in the field, and then go back. As a pink sun rose over the pines, vast patches of grass in the field flared up and crackled. Field mice stumbled out toward the cool safety of the riverbank. Dazed and disoriented, they would have made easy meals, but Bristle let them pass, as if obeying some code that protected those so terrified. She stood and gazed over the smoking field. We have to leave. Now. Pax knew that she was right. He followed her out of the reeds. Bristle called to Runt, who was watching a wandering vole. He didn't even flick his ears toward his sister. And Pax now understood. Runt could not hear. Poor Runt. During that big explosion, he must have lost his hearing. Oh, poor Runt. He's lost a leg. He's lost his hearing. How will he ever survive? We'll find out.